All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's great to be talking to all of you, and it's great to have such a large and I understand international audience. And so welcome. One of Ayn Rand's important observations is that it is philosophical ideas that both shape you as an individual and that shape the culture. You are shaped as an individual, either consciously or unconsciously, by the ideas that you have either embraced, studied, adopted consciously, or that you have allowed to just filter in, sift in, and influence who you are and what you think, what you believe. All of that is shaped by fundamental ideas conveyed to you in some way, right? A culture functions in a very similar way. A culture is just a collection of individuals. A culture is shaped by the ideas prevalent among those individuals. Ideas that might have been accepted consciously, souls that might have been shaped by individual minds, considering and studying particular philosophies. But more likely, and in most cases, it's ideas that people have just kind of through osmosis accepted from the culture subconsciously, from their parents, from their teachers, from their preachers, from the intellectuals, from the news, from the media, from their politicians, from the schools, and from the universities. So when we look around the world, what we see are cultures that have been shaped really from the perspective of the individuals participating in the cultures that have been shaped for the most part by intellectuals, and where the individuals within the culture have accepted these ideas without necessarily thinking them through, without necessarily understanding them thoroughly, but embracing them nonetheless. You see this, for example, in a concept like altruism. Altruism is an idea that you should live for the sake of others, sacrifice your life for others. That the purpose of your life is not your own happiness, it's not your own success, it's not your own flourishing. The purpose of your life is other people, is their well-being in some way. And this idea was originally articulated by a philosopher, Auguste Comte, but it was an idea that maybe without the term of altruism, but there's idea that secular philosophers and certainly Christianity has been embedding in the culture for hundreds, thousands of years. Most people don't think of it in that term. Most people absorb over and over again in the culture the idea that they should care about other people, they should sacrifice for other people. They don't really want to. They live their own lives, but deep down they know, or because they've heard and they understand that morality demands that they treat other people. They don't think in terms of, I shouldn't be happy, I should just focus on the well-being of others. But when they do pursue their own happiness, they feel this tinge of guilt. When they do pursue their own happiness, they feel wrong about it. Their own psychology undermines themselves, and they don't have the tools to think through about why that is. What is the inconsistency? They just know that happens. And when political leaders or other intellectuals present them with ideas of socialism and sacrifice and helping other people through statist mechanisms, they appeal to these people, not because they understand what is going on, but because to some extent, it relieves some of this guilt that is associated with a ethical belief that they've never really thought through, that they don't fully understand, but is part of who they are. And it shapes their decisions. It shapes the way they vote. It shapes their own psychology. It shapes their ability or inability to be happy. Intellectuals have taken this idea of altruism and applied it in a million different ways to every aspect of our lives, from its deep moral implications as taught maybe in a philosophy class, to its implications with regard to business. Right now, it's very, very common to talk about stakeholder well-being and the role of a business to benefit society. And God forbid you say anything about making money or making profit, because that would be too self-interested. To the way psychologists, I think, might help us and emphasize how what we do with other people and how we relate to other people. It's in every different aspect of our lives. Altruism is being interpreted and explained to us within the context of particular knowledge, from economics, business, psychology, history, the way history is interpreted, all are shaped by our fundamental philosophical idea. And this is true of all philosophical ideas in a variety of different ways. And of course, we know that the philosophy that has shaped the modern world, as Anka has explained, is to a large extent wrong. It is the intellectuals of the last 150 years are being influenced by Kantian ideas, ideas of Rousseau, ideas of Marx, ideas that are predominantly, unfortunately, anti-reason, anti-egoism, anti-individualism, and ultimately anti-capitalism. And therefore, it isn't surprising that we live in a culture, we live in a world that is drifting away and has drifted away from reason, from individualism, from capitalism. For decades, the intellectuals influenced by these philosophies are now influencing others with regard to these philosophies. And the only way to turn this around, is by replacing those intellectuals. Not convincing them, not changing their minds. It's unlikely and almost impossible. But replacing them with new intellectuals. As Ayn Rand, kind of the call to action that she makes in For the New Intellectual, as Anka described. It's a call for action for intellectuals to now take up the banner of reason, the banner of egoism, the banner of individualism and capitalism. Intellectuals who will now explain the world in terms of these fundamental ideas. In some future world, some saner, better, more capitalist, more free world, it is not necessarily going to be the case. It is unlikely to be the case that everybody in that world will have read philosophy, understood philosophy, embraced a philosophy of reason and freedom, and therefore is supportive of capitalism. It is much more likely that the majority of people in a world like that will have been influenced by intellectuals that have those principles as they guide. But that the majority of individuals now have explanations of the world around them, of their own life, of what happens and what is likely to happen in the future, from the perspective of reason, egoism, individualism, capitalism, rather than the perspective that is the opposite. And as the number of intellectuals grows, advocating, explaining the world, as Anka quoted Ayn Rand, being the ears, the eyes, the ears, the voice of a free society, but the eyes, the ears, the voice from a rational perspective, explaining the world from the perspective of reason and individualism. As the number of those kind of intellectuals grows, the culture will start to shift. The culture, individuals within the world will start adopting ideas that are more rational, that are more egoistic, that are more sympathetic to capitalism. And over time, that is how we will establish a culture of reason and freedom. So one of the things that I think should excite anybody about being an intellectual is this ability to really change the world. Because that's what you have the potential of doing. You do it by changing one mind at a time, one individual's mind at a time. You do it by helping people understand the world around them, and slowly reshape their values and the way they live their life based on that understanding. And as those numbers grow, as that one mind at a time, as you get more and more minds like that, thousands, hundreds of thousands, ultimately millions and tens of millions, the culture will change. It won't change all at once. It won't change in some big dramatic event, I don't think. It'll change gradually as more minds are shifted away from a false interpretation of what is going on in the world, the false interpretation that our current intellectuals pursue, to a true interpretation of the world, the kind of interpretation that future rational, objectivism-inspired intellectuals can provide. So, the job of the intellectual is to help shape people's understanding of the world around them, to provide them with an interpretation. People are busy. People are living their lives. They don't have an opportunity to not just listen constantly, to read the latest papers, to analyze the news, and to study philosophy so that they have the proper tools to explain what is going on. People need the guidance that the intellectuals provide. So the career of an intellectual, I agree completely with Anka, is an exciting one. It's a thrilling one. It's one that's engaged constantly with the world, with ideas, and with people. Because the idea ultimately is not just to write a book and forget about it. The idea is to write a book that is read by individuals. The idea is to interact with people and over time help them change, help them understand, help them gain an understanding of the world around them, and thus to change the culture, to change the world. And to do that, as objectivists, as those of us who advocate for Ayn Rand's ideas, we're going to need hundreds of intellectuals, thousands on a global scale of intellectuals. We're going to need intellectuals in a variety of different fields. Obviously, we will need philosophers. Those are the basic ideas that all other intellectuals need in order to help them, to help understand and explain the world around them. But we're going to need intellectuals in business, in science, in education. Education is crucial. We're going to need intellectuals in history, political science, economics. In every realm of human knowledge, there is a role for intellectuals. And to shape a culture, to change a culture, we're going to have to be able to explain and advocate, analyze things that are going on in every dimension, every dimension of human life. So it's not one path, it's not just one set of knowledge. It's broad, and there's a role for intellectuals in a variety of different fields. But the core here is philosophy. To be an effective intellectual, you have to know, you have to integrate the basic philosophical knowledge. So I want to talk just a little bit about what it's going to take, what it takes for somebody to become an intellectual. And Anka and I were, I think, lucky enough to be together in the 1990s in the Objectivist Graduate Center, the original educational program of the Ayn Rand Institute, well, we studied philosophy. We studied philosophy and we studied how to communicate that philosophy. Today, that program has gone through many evolutions, and today is the Objectivist Academic Center, which is training individuals in the ideas of objectivism, in the philosophy of objectivism, but also on how to think about issues in the world out there, and then how to communicate your views about them. It is a crucial educational program, in my view, for the future of intellectuals in the world in which we live. And I encourage you guys, anybody out there who's interested in becoming an intellectual, who's interested in becoming somebody who takes Ayn Rand's philosophy and then articulates it and then, uses it to explain to others how the world is working and what is happening in the world, I encourage you all to sign up for the OAC and get that kind of training. Changing the world is going to require changing the implicit and explicit ideas that people in our culture hold. The only people who can do that are culture's intellectuals. The current intellectuals, the intellectuals from the last 200 years, really since the Enlightenment, have really betrayed us. They betrayed the world. They provided bad, evil explanations of what is going on and steered the world in a wrong direction. We have the opportunity to fix that by replacing them. So to the extent, again, that there are individuals out there, young or not, who are interested in joining kind of the intellectual battle to reshape the world, to steer the world in the right direction, to bring about another enlightenment or another renaissance, please join us. As Onkar said, it's an exciting, thrilling profession. It's a lot of fun. And I'd say in particular right now, and I'll end with just this thought. In the 21st century, we now for the first time have tools, and we're using one right now, that make it possible for us to communicate ideas on a global scale. That make it possible for us to articulate ideas as intellectuals to people all over the world with no limit on how many people consume our content. And at a cost, basically, of zero, almost at a costless rate. The new tools are being invented on a daily basis, from the popularity of Zoom. Remember Zoom from 10 years ago? You don't, because it didn't exist. It's a relatively new phenomenon. I've been using Zoom for 2 or 3 years, but it really has blown up over the last year. But video communication on a global scale is going to become better and better and better, and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. I mean, it's already basically zero. Broadband is going to become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And it's going to be ubiquitous. It's going to be everywhere on the entire planet. Other tools, from Substack to social media to a whole variety of communication tools, in which we can now spread our ideas by writing them and getting them out there to basically to everybody on planet Earth, speaking the ideas and getting it to everybody in real time or in lag time, having vast libraries of content. The ability to be an intellectual today and to earn a living as an intellectual today, to pursue an intellectual career today, there's never been a parallel to what we have today. I mean, so many intellectuals right now are funding themselves on the internet, are finding ways to sustain their own work without a university or without a particular institution. That it is truly, I think, an exciting time, and I think it's going to get better. I think there's a lot of technologies coming down the pipe that are only going to make it easier for intellectuals to promote their work and to make a living from their work. So again, there's never been a better time to do this. There's never been a better time to make a living doing this. And of course, there's never been a better time to do this, partially because the Institute, I think today, the Ayn Rand Institute today, is providing us with more and more tools, both intellectual, both in terms of studying the philosophy, and as I think Tal is going to explain in a few minutes, also in guidance on how to communicate these ideas, both technically and philosophically. So join us in this struggle to change the direction of a culture. Again, we need hundreds of you, and hopefully we'll be seeing many of you join the OAC and support the OAC so that we can help produce hundreds of new intellectuals that will help shape and change the future. Thank you.